You ever notice how people get scared of knives? I mean, really scared. Not because of the cut, but because of what it means. A knife is close. It's personal. It ain't like a bullet. A bullet is lazy, cold, quick, distant. But a knife? You feel every inch. You look the pain in the eye while it's slicing through skin. You see who did it. You remember who did it. That's the part that really hurts, not the scar, the memory. And you? Oh, they didn't just stab you once, did they? Nah. They twisted that blade like they would say they were cooking something inside your soul. And the worst part? You gave them the handle. You trusted. You believed. And they used that belief to break you. They didn't even flinch while doing it. That's the real joke. But here's where the story flips, and they never see it coming. You didn't let the wound fester. You didn't cry yourself into the ground and stay there. Nah, you pulled that knife out, and you looked at it. Every inch covered in your pain, your loyalty, your silence. You looked at it, and you didn't throw it away. You kept it. You sharpened it, polished it, turned it into something else entirely. A weapon, one with your fingerprints all over it. One they'll never recognize until it's too late. You think that makes you broken? Nah. It makes you evolved. They created a version of you they can't handle now. Funny, huh? All that love you gave, they treated it like garbage. Now that same love turned into something unrecognizable. A warning, a blade. You ain't soft anymore. You ain't begging. You ain't explaining your worth to people who couldn't even spell loyalty without a mirror and a manual. You speak with silence now. You speak through your moves, your glow-up, your distance. You speak with that weapon you forged from pain. And let me tell you something else. Silence is sharper than any blade they ever used on you. You know what else is funny? The moment you went quiet, that's when they started listening. All those words they ignored, suddenly they echo now. That same silence they mocked, now it chokes them. It screams. It repeats everything they wish they could undo, but it's too late. That knife ain't in your back anymore. It's in your hands, and you ain't bleeding anymore. They are. From guilt, from realization, from knowing they broke something they'll never be able to fix. That's the price of betrayal, kid. You don't get closure. You get consequences. And you're the consequence now. So here's the deal. They thought you'd fall. They thought you'd cry yourself out of the fight, but you showed up, colder, smarter, quieter, more dangerous. You don't yell, you don't explain, you just exist. And that alone, that's war. That's pain they never prepared for. You became the storm they swore would never come. The proof that even if they cut you down, you rise sharper, meaner, focused. And what they don't know yet is that the person you were before the pain, he's gone. And what's left ain't just surviving, he's hunting. So don't apologize for who you became. Don't hide your scars. Don't soften your voice to make them feel comfortable. Nah, they don't deserve that peace. You gave them gold, and they asked for dirt. So now, they choke on dust. And you walk alone, but not weak, not hollow. You walk like someone who knows what betrayal tastes like, and chose never to swallow it again. That's what strength really is, kid. Not lifting weights, not punching walls. It's sitting with pain until it folds into your fists. It's walking away from fire without burning anyone because you already turned into smoke. That knife, that betrayal, that silence you swallowed when they lied to your face, that's your story now. That's your edge. And every time they remember you, they'll feel the cut. Not because you hurt them, but because they hurt themselves. By thinking someone like you was disposable. They bet on your weakness. You responded with evolution. You became a weapon, and no one saw it coming. Keep walking. Keep cutting. Not them, not yourself, but through the noise, the lies, the fake hands and temporary hearts. You're not here to please. You're here to prove, and they'll learn. One silence at a time. They thought the wound would define you, that the blood would drain your will, that the silence you fell into was a coffin, not a cocoon. But you didn't die there. You just changed. You transformed. You studied every crack in your soul like a blueprint. You stitched yourself together with wire, not thread. You didn't need their apologies. You needed their absence. And now that you've tasted what real betrayal feels like, you've developed an immunity. You don't fear loss anymore. Because the worst kind of loss is the one that teaches you that even the people who claim to love you can be the same ones who sharpen the blade. And now you know. Not everyone who holds your hand has good intentions. Some hold it just long enough to guide your back to the edge. So now your trust comes with locks, alarms, steel walls. And that's not weakness. That's wisdom. They don't teach that kind of strength in schools. They don't write it in books. It's the kind of strength that grows in silence, when no one's looking, when the phone doesn't ring, when the love you gave returns empty. That's when the real beast inside wakes up. That's when you realize you're not waiting on anyone anymore. Not their texts, not their closure, not their regret. You're the closure. You're the end of the chapter they wrote in pencil. You're the storm they laughed at until it tore the roof off their peace. And now, they watch you from the shadows, quiet, ashamed, wondering how someone they once toyed with became someone untouchable. That's your power now. Beausain's distance, silence. You became the ghost of their guilt. And trust me, that's louder than any revenge. See, when people hurt you, they don't expect you to grow teeth. They expect a victim. They expect tears, breakdowns, begging. But you didn't give them that. You gave them silence. You gave them distance. You gave them the cold stare of someone who knows too much. And it broke them. Because there's nothing scarier than someone who's been through hell and came back with a calm face. Someone who learned the rules of pain and now plays the game better than anyone. That's you. You're no longer reacting. You're calculating. You don't scream to be understood. You let people drown in the silence they forced on you. That's the real art of war. Make them think you're gone. Then let your growth haunt their reflection. And while they laugh with others now, pretending you never meant much, deep down, they remember every word you said, every time you showed up, every time you forgave, every little detail you remembered about them. That's the cut that won't close. Because no matter how many people they replace you with, they know it's not you. It never will be. That's the price of playing with loyalty. You don't just lose someone. You lose peace. You lose protection. You lose the one person who would have walked into fire for you without hesitation. And they'll feel that absence in places they can't even name. So keep your head high, even if your heart still bleeds sometimes. That's not weakness. That's proof you cared, that you loved real, that you tried. But just because you cared deeply doesn't mean you should suffer endlessly. That's the old version of you. The one who thought love meant saving people from themselves. Now you understand that not everyone wants saving. Some people want chaos. Some people want attention. Some people are so empty, they'll break others just to feel full. And it's not your job to fix that. Your job is to protect your peace. Even if that means walking away from the very thing you once begged to stay. So yeah, that knife, that betrayal, that silence they left you in, you forged it, you sharpened it, and now you walk with it, not to hurt, but to protect, to cut through lies, to defend your peace. And anyone who tries to get close without earning their spot, they meet the blade, not your kindness. Because your kindness isn't cheap anymore. It's earned. And only the real ones get to see it now. You ever sit in a room full of people and feel like a ghost? Like you're there, breathing, blinking, bleeding, but nobody really sees you? That's what betrayal does. It don't just hurt. It erases you. Slowly. Like they're rewriting the story you built with your bare hands and acting like you were never part of it. But here's the thing they never count on. Silence don't mean defeat. Silence is the storm before the reckoning. It's the space where real strength is born. And while they were out there living loud, trying to prove they moved on, you were rebuilding, brick by scarred brick. Not with noise, not with pity, but with pure, raw focus. And now you walk different, you carry yourself different. Not because you're better than them, but because you're not them. You don't need the crowd. You don't need the validation. You learn to eat alone, sit with your demons, and smile anyway. That's rare. That's dangerous. That's you. See, what they took for weakness was really depth. What they mocked as too emotional was just a heart that felt too much in a world that feels too little. They saw your silence and mistook it for softness. But silence is where killers are born. Silent people don't need revenge. They become revenge. You became everything they thought you'd never be. And now the funny part? They start watching your moves again, quietly, from behind screens, through mutuals, through memories, hoping maybe, just maybe, you'll say something, break your silence, give them proof they still exist in your world, but you won't. Because this version of you doesn't move backwards, doesn't re-explain, doesn't reopen wounds that were stitched shut with lessons. You walk forward, even if it's slow, even if it's lonely, even if it's painful, because forward is where the power lives, where peace breathes, where their shadows can't follow. You know what most people don't understand? Pain isn't the villain. Comfort is. Pain wakes you up, forces your hand, turns a heart into armor. But comfort, that's the real killer. That's what keeps people chasing ghosts, settling, lowering their worth just to feel wanted. But you chose discomfort. You chose growth. You chose to sit with the silence until it whispered the truth, that the people who left weren't your loss. You were theirs. And one day, whether it's tomorrow or 10 years from now, they'll realize it. That they threw away someone who would have fought kingdoms for them, just because they didn't want to hold a real one. That's how it goes. Real is too heavy for hollow people. And you were always too heavy to carry, too bright to see, too real to keep. So let them talk, let them lie, let them convince themselves you were the problem, that you were too much, that you changed. Because you did change into something they'll never deserve again. And that scares the hell out of them, not because you became cruel, but because you became untouchable. They can't reach you now, not through words, not through guilt, not through fake apologies wrapped in nostalgia. You outgrew their access. You leveled up in silence, and now, every time your name comes up, it stings. Not because of what you did, but because of what they didn't do when they had the chance. This new version of you, the one who doesn't chase, doesn't beg, doesn't explain, that's your final form. That's the weapon you forged from that knife. And you carry it not to stab, but to slice through every fake bond, every empty promise, every I love you that had a timer on it. You see through people now. You don't just hear words, you feel intentions. You don't fall for pretty, you fall for consistency, effort, respect. And if it ain't there, you bounce. No drama, no breakdown, just silence, just presence, just the echo of someone who once gave everything and now gives nothing without return. They thought they left you broken, that by turning their back, They shattered something too fragile to rebuild. What they didn't understand is that some people don't fall apart. They fall silent. And silence? That's where the real monsters are born. You didn't break. You froze. You stopped bleeding, stopped talking, stopped justifying, and started studying. That's what they'll never comprehend. That when you went quiet, you weren't done. You were calculating. You were collecting data, processing betrayal, memorizing faces, archiving lies. And in that silence, you became something far more dangerous than angry. You became aware, fully, completely aware of who they were, of what you allowed, of what you'll never allow again. You ain't the same person anymore, not even close. That version of you, the one who forgave too quickly, loved too hard, explained too much, died the day they put that knife in your back. And you held your own funeral, quietly, alone. No one showed up, no one brought flowers, but still, you buried that soft version of yourself 6 feet under, with every broken promise and every "I'll never hurt you" that turned into a blade. And what rose out of that dirt wasn't a victim, it was a storm, a quiet one, a cold one, the kind that wipes everything in its path without a single warning. Now you walk with that same silence in your chest, not because you're empty, but because you're full of truth, of lessons, of scars that learned how to breathe. They won't understand it. They'll call you heartless, say you've changed. Of course you have. That's the point. Growth ain't supposed to look familiar to the people who stayed the same. You didn't just heal. You now for she hardened iran chi. You didn't just move on, you bright. You upgraded. They can't reach you now, and it terrifies them. They know if they saw you in a crowd today, they wouldn't even recognize the way you carry yourself. Head higher, eyes colder, smile rare. Not bitter, just evolved. You speak less, but mean more. You trust slower, but love sharper. And that makes you a threat in a world full of people still playing pretend. Because here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. People don't destroy you because they hate you. They destroy you because they know how rare you are. They know your love hits different. Your presence commands attention. Your loyalty is a fortress, and they don't feel worthy of that. So instead of rising to meet you, they try to cut you down, make you small, play with your heart like it's disposable. But deep down, they knew. They knew. They were never going to find another you. And now they sit with that knowledge, quietly, secretly, regrettably, pretending they don't care, pretending they're unbothered. But every silent moment, every night alone, you're there, not in person, but in the echo, in the guilt, in the absence of what you once gave without limits. You ain't chasing ghosts anymore. You're not out here trying to remind people of what they lost. Nah, you became the reminder, just by existing, just by glowing in silence, just by continuing to rise without them. And it burns them in ways they can't show. Because what are they going to say? I lost someone who would have never betrayed me? That truth doesn't fit in their fake narrative. So they lie, pretend, play the victim. That's the funny part. You gave them peace, and they gave you pain. And now that you found your peace again, they're the ones drowning. So keep that silence. Guard it like gold. It's not just power, it's proof. Proof that you don't need revenge to win. That your glow up ain't fueled by hate. It's fueled by rebirth. You didn't become colder to hurt people. You became colder to stop getting hurt. That knife, it didn't just cut your back. It carved your destiny. It gave you direction. And now, you carry it on your belt, not your back. Because no one's gonna cut you the same way twice. Let them wonder. Let them sit in circles, swapping stories about why you disappeared, why your smile vanished, why your voice faded into a graveyard of unanswered calls. Let them guess. That's the price they pay for playing with something real. Confusion, doubt, endless rewinds of memories they swore didn't matter until you stopped showing up. They wanted you loud when it served them. They wanted you soft when it suited their comfort. But the second you went silent, they realized something terrifying. You weren't a phase. You were the standard. You were the calm in their chaos. The loyalty they thought was common. And now that calm is gone, and they're left choking on noise. The same noise they fed you when they ignored your presence, took your kindness for weakness, and laughed while you bled behind a smile. You see, people don't always stab you out of hate. Sometimes they stab you just to see if you'll still come back, if you'll still hold the same warmth after being cut. And you used to. You used to excuse every slice. You'd say, maybe they're just going through something, or they didn't mean it. You were the master of giving chances to people who wouldn't give you the truth. But that part of you died. You buried it under every unanswered message, every fake apology, every red flag you painted white just to avoid the reality that they never loved you like you loved them. They loved your energy, your effort, your availability. But you were just the vessel, a convenience. And when the high wore off, they vanished. And you stayed, cleaning up the pieces they left behind like a war medic with no army. But that's over now. You ain't cleaning up after people who lit the fire and ran. You're not explaining your worth to people who treat your presence like a temporary option. You're not asking people to love you better anymore. You're watching who chooses to. And if no one does, that's peace, not loneliness. That's elevation, not isolation. You've learned that being alone isn't scary. Begging to be seen by blind people is. That kind of hunger drains you, dulls you, and you were never meant to be dimmed just so someone else could feel bright. So now, you move in silence, not out of fear, but out of calculation. You don't let them know what hurts you. You don't tell them what matters. You let them think they know you. Let them talk. Let them assume. Meanwhile, you're stacking victories in private, growing in places they can't see, becoming the version of yourself that doesn't need their validation or their friendship or their fake loyalty. You've outgrown that table. Hell, you burned the whole room down and built something new with your own hands. And that knife, the one they left in your back, it's now the tool you use to carve your own path. You don't walk like a victim. You walk like vengeance that learned how to smile. Because let's be real, healing doesn't make you soft. It makes you selective. It doesn't mean you forget what they did. It means you remember and still chose to rise anyway, with a quieter voice, a firmer spine, a gaze they can't hold for long. You became everything they feared you'd become the moment they saw what kind of heart you had. That's why they left. Not because you weren't enough, but because you were too much for people who operate on half-truths and temporary loyalty. And now, they sit in rooms with people who never really see them, thinking about how you did, thinking about how they laughed while you were in pain, how they looked away when you needed someone to stay, and it haunts them that they were the reason you became this quiet, this strong, this untouchable. So don't speak, don't explain, don't entertain the echoes of your past. You're not there anymore. You've become the silence they never expected to scream this loud. And the longer you stay silent, the more they'll feel it. Not in their ears, but in their guilt. That's the loudest punishment of all. They'll swear they didn't mean to hurt you. They'll look back and pretend it was all confusion, all miscommunication, all just a phase where they weren't themselves. But deep down, in the quiet corners of their mind, they know. They know they had something rare, something real, something built from your bare hands and sleepless nights. And they destroyed it because they thought it would always be there. People get lazy with loyalty. They treat devotion like a disposable lighter, use it to warm their ego for a while, then toss it when the flame gets too low. But you weren't a lighter. You were a damn fire pit. You gave warmth, light, protection. And they walked away like they wouldn't freeze in your absence. Let them. That cold they feel now, that's not the weather. That's you. Gone. Pulled back. Disconnected. Unreachable. And here's the catch. They won't tell the truth about it. Number. They'll rewrite the story. Play the victim. Make you sound like the one who changed. The one who gave up. The one who acted different. Of course you acted different. Betrayal changes everything. It rewires your mind. It rips the innocence right out of your chest and replaces it with a radar, one that detects every fake smile, every slight hesitation, every word that doesn't match. Energy. You don't hear "I love you" the same way anymore. You hear, "How long before this one breaks too?" You don't just see faces. You scan for masks. You don't just open your heart. You check for escape plans. That's not paranoia. That's survival. That's what happens when you've been cut by the same type of hand you used to hold tight. So when they say you're too guarded now, let them talk. Let them try to figure out how to get back in. They're not knocking on your door anymore. They're knocking on a vault. And guess what? You've changed the code. Because, you know now, access is a privilege, not a right. You don't owe anyone entry just because they once made you smile. Smiles don't mean safety. Feelings don't equal loyalty. You learned that the hard way. And now, you move differently. You trust differently. You see through people like X-rays. And the moment something feels off, you don't argue, you don't explain, you don't beg, you vanish. Like a ghost with unfinished business. Except your business now is you. Your peace, your purpose, your power. And make no mistake, this silence you walk with, it isn't hollow, it's heavy. It carries everything you've been through, every sleepless night, every fake friend, every time you questioned your worth because someone else couldn't recognize it. That weight in your chest, that's your armor now. That's the blade you carry. You don't flash it. You don't swing it wildly. You just have it. And people feel it when they're around you. They feel the edge in your voice, the calm in your stare, the way you say nothing. And it says everything. That's real power. The kind that doesn't seek validation. The kind that doesn't need revenge. The kind that simply exists. And makes people regret ever taking you for granted. See, they wanted a reaction. They wanted to see if they still had control over your emotions. But you gave them silence. And now, they sit with their thoughts at night, replaying your last words, your last message, your last look, wondering if you ever think about them. You don't. Not because you forgot, but because you finally remembered yourself. Your peace ain't negotiable anymore. Your presence ain't cheap. Your love, that's earned. That's sacred. That's not something you hand out to people who treat it like a placeholder until something better comes along. So let them feel that absence. Let them tell their side of the story to anyone who will listen. You don't need to correct the lies. The truth has a way of showing up without a mouthpiece. You stay silent, stay focused, stay dangerous, because silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of discipline. And you've mastered it. You've turned it into a blade sharper than anything they ever used against you. That knife they left in your back, you didn't just survive it, you forged it. And now, you carry it with pride. You ever realize how loud silence becomes when it's carrying regret? Not your regret, theirs. The same ones who once ignored your voice now hear echoes of it in every quiet room they enter. They laughed when you were soft, mocked your loyalty, called you too emotional, too serious, too intense. They thought your depth was a flaw. But now they scroll in silence, watching you evolve from a distance they can't shrink, choking on a truth they refused to accept when you were right in front of them, that you were never too much. They were just never enough. And now they're haunted by your absence. Not because they miss controlling you, but because they lost. The only person who actually showed up when it mattered. That's what cuts deepest. Not that you left, but that you left quietly. No drama, no final speech, no explosion, just gone. That kind of silence, it rattles the bones. It forces them to replay every moment, trying to pinpoint when exactly they lost access. And the truth? It wasn't one moment. It was layers. Layers of disrespect. Layers of broken expectations. Layers of fake effort and delayed responses. Layers of you biting your tongue while they twisted the knife. And eventually you just stopped bleeding. Not because it didn't hurt anymore, but because pain turned into clarity. And clarity, that's fatal to fake connections. It doesn't scream. It doesn't cry. It just walks away. And never looks back. You used to explain yourself. You used to overthink every silence, every shift in tone, every unread message. But now you don't chase closure. You are the closure. You realize that not everyone is supposed to understand your heart. And it's not your job to teach them. You're not a lesson. You're a warning. The next time they meet someone like you, they'll flinch. Not because you were cruel, but because you were kind. And they turned it into a weakness. Now, every time they come across realness, they'll question if it's real, because they know what they did with it when you gave it. And you walk with a different energy now, not arrogance, awareness. You don't trust fast. You don't fall easy. You don't give your time to people who don't treat it like a gift. You're not bitter. You're built. You're not cold. You're calculated. You're not heartless. Your heart just learned how to defend itself. It still beats, but it no longer bleeds for empty hands. You became everything they prayed you wouldn't. Independent. Because people like that, they need to feel needed. The moment you stop needing them, they spiral. And that's the irony. They pushed you to the edge thinking you'd break. But you learned to fly. You built wings from scraps, took every insult, every lie, every lonely night and wove them into feathers. And now you soar in silence, above the noise, above the fake love, above the memory of who you used to be when you still thought loyalty could save people. You don't need to tell them you healed. Your peace screams it louder than words ever could. And the more silent you become, the more obvious your strength is. Because true power It doesn't come from shouting. It comes from not needing to speak at all. It comes from walking past what once broke you, untouched, unbothered, unreachable. So let them keep talking. Let them invent versions of the story where they were the victim. That's how the guilty sleep at night, by turning the truth into fiction. But you don't need to correct them. You don't need to defend yourself. The real ones know. The silence knows. And most importantly, you know. You survived what they tried to bury you with. You turned the grave into a garden. And now you bloom in places they'll never have access to again. That knife, the one they thought would end you, you turned it into a tool, not just to protect, but to build a new life, a new mind, a new version of yourself so strong, so silent, so undeniable that they don't just miss you, they fear the day you finally speak. Because when you do, the truth will be a blade they can't outrun. They never expected the silence to last this long. They thought it was temporary, a phase, a moment of anger you'd eventually walk back from like you always did before. But not this time. This time, something shifted. This wasn't just you pulling back. This was you closing the door, quietly, without a slam, without a warning, just a firm, final silence. The kind that says, "You'll never hurt me like that again." And that's what scares them. Because they've seen your storms, the fire, the passion, the tears. But this version of you, this quiet, calculated version that doesn't even respond, that's new. That's what they can't handle. They don't know how to fight a ghost. They don't know how to argue with peace. They don't know how to compete with someone who's done trying. You don't flinch anymore. That's what they notice first. The things that used to shatter you barely register now. The silence you once feared, you now crave it. The attention you begged for, you replaced it with solitude. The people you used to chase, you replaced them with purpose. You learned that not every absence is a loss. Some are liberation. You didn't walk away from them. You walked back to yourself. And that's something they'll never understand, because they've never had to rebuild their identity from broken promises. But you did. You picked up every shard, every lie, every moment of being overlooked, and you built armor from it, not to hide behind, but to rise in. And now, you walk with silence on your back like a king wears a crown. Earned, heavy, undeniable. You're not here for revenge. That's the old you. The one who thought closure was something you could pull from someone else's mouth. But not now. Now you know, closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. A moment. You look in the mirror and say, "That's it. I'm done." No drama. No announcement. Just a quiet shift that screams louder than any confrontation ever could. Because when you stop arguing, when you stop explaining, when you stop defending yourself, That's when they realize you were the real one. That's when the weight of what they lost finally starts to settle in. Not when you yell, not when you cry, but when you go quiet. And let's be clear, your silence isn't cold, it's wise. It's the kind of silence that comes from being burned too many times by the same type of fire. You didn't just get smarter, you got selective. You don't entertain chaos, you don't respond to bait, you don't open doors just because someone suddenly remembers how to knock. You've built something sacred inside yourself now. Peace, discipline, solitude. And not everyone gets to enter. That's the lesson they learn too late. That loyalty doesn't reset just because they feel nostalgic. That respect isn't earned by showing up late with an apology soaked in guilt. That love, real love, doesn't keep score, but it remembers the damage. You remember everything, not with bitterness, but with clarity. You remember how they disappeared when you needed someone most. You remember how they laughed a little too hard when you were crumbling. You remember how you gave everything and they treated it like a backup plan. You carry those memories like warnings now, not weights. You don't hate them, you just know them. And knowing someone for who they truly are, that changes everything. It turns I miss you into I see you clearly now. It turns maybe one day into never again. So when they come back, and they will, with guilt in their eyes and softness in their voice, don't speak, don't explain. Let them sit in the silence they created. Let them feel the distance they dug. Let them look at the person they lost and understand that you didn't become colder. You became correct. That knife they once used to test your breaking point, you turned it into a boundary, a line they can't cross again, a lesson they'll never forget. You don't need closure from the ones who broke you. You are the closure. And your silence, that's the final word. Funny, isn't it? How the same people who shattered you now act confused by your silence. Like they forgot they were the ones who held the hammer. Like they don't remember the nights you sat alone, staring at your phone, replaying every conversation in your head, trying to figure out what you did wrong. But you know better now. You've seen through the illusions, the patterns, the fake apologies, the temporary affection, the recycled words. You learned that people don't accidentally hurt you over and over. They just don't care enough not to. That's the kind of lesson life doesn't teach gently. It teaches it with blood, with silence, with abandonment. And you learned it deep. You learned it in a way that rewired your instincts. Now, instead of asking, why did they leave? You ask, why did I stay so long? You stayed because your heart was built for loyalty, because you thought real love meant holding on through every storm, even if the storm was them. You made excuses. You romanticized the chaos. You believed in the potential instead of accepting the reality. And they knew that. They counted on that. See, people like that, They feed on your hope. They come close when they're hungry and disappear when they're full. And by the time you realize it, you're left there, empty, trying to pour from a cup they cracked with their absence. But not anymore. You're done pouring into the ungrateful. You're done lighting yourself on fire just to keep people warm, who never planned to stay near the flame. You stopped being the healer for people who only show up to hurt. And now everything about you is different. Not loud different, not showy, just solid, still, unshakable. You walk into rooms and say nothing, but your energy speaks first. It says, I've been through hell, and I kept going. I know what fake love looks like with a smile. I know what betrayal feels like behind kind eyes. I've been promised forever by people who didn't even mean next week, and I survived it. Alone, quiet, scarred but standing. You carry that weight like armor now, and people feel it. They feel the silence, the calm, the sharpness in your boundaries. And the ones who meant harm, they know they can't access you the same way. Not anymore. You've become something they can't explain, can't label, can't manipulate. You're no longer the version of yourself who needs validation to feel worthy. You've looked in the mirror long enough to know what you're made of. Pain didn't just shape you. It refined you. Every scar is a signature, every disappointment a chapter, every betrayal a lesson you learned in a language only the broken understand. And that language, you speak it fluently now. That's why your silence is terrifying. Because it's not empty. It's full of answers, full of stories, full of strength. It says, I know exactly who I am, and I no longer need you to understand it. They wanted control. That's what it was always about. Your silence breaks that. It strips them of the power they once held over your reactions, your mind, your emotions. They don't get to press the same buttons anymore. Because you removed them. You took your soul off the table. You shut the doors they thought they could always walk through. You became a locked vault they can't pick open with guilt or nostalgia. And the more they try to remember the old you, the one who used to forgive so easily, the one who'd respond in seconds, the one who'd stay up late fixing problems they created, the more they realize that version is gone, replaced, upgraded, hardened. You didn't get colder. You just learned the difference between peace and attachment, between being needed and being used. You finally stopped giving CPR to relationships that were already dead. And now, instead of fixing broken people, you focus on building yourself quietly, ruthlessly, unapologetically. Because you've learned some people will only value you when they lose access. And some losses, they're permanent. Not out of hate, but out of respect for yourself. So keep building, keep rising, keep saying nothing. Let your silence speak in volumes they can't mute. That knife, that betrayal, That moment when they thought you'd never recover, that was your beginning. And everything you've become since, that's the revenge they never saw coming. They'll tell people you changed, that you became distant, unrecognizable, cold. But what they won't say, what they'll never admit, is why. They won't mention the lies, the manipulation, the way they pulled away while pretending to stay close. They won't talk about how they made you feel like a burden when all you ever gave was love. How they watched your light dim, and instead of reigniting it, they used the darkness to hide their own damage. No, they won't say that part, because admitting that would mean facing the reality that they were the ones who turned you into a fortress. That the walls you built weren't out of ego, they were out of survival. And now those walls, they're bulletproof, fireproof, betrayal-proof. You're not broken, you're rebuilt. And people don't know how to handle a soul that's been remade through fire. They only knew how to manipulate the version of you that didn't see their patterns yet. But once you saw it, once the veil was lifted, it was over. Not loud, not messy, just done. And that's what they never expected. They thought they could keep dancing around your limits forever, never realizing that you weren't setting boundaries. You were giving chances, one after the other, quietly, kindly, until there were none left, until the well ran dry, until the knife they left in your back was no longer a wound. It was a weapon. And now they talk about you like you were the problem, as if the silence you walk with today didn't come from years of swallowing your pride, burying your instincts, and silencing your own needs to keep their comfort intact. As if the coldness in your eyes now wasn't forged in the heat of their gaslighting, their disappearing acts, their casual betrayals dressed up as misunderstandings. They don't realize the silence you carry is the loudest scream they'll ever hear. And it echoes in every corner of their guilt, not because you're angry, but because you're finished. You don't check your phone hoping for their name anymore. You don't wait on apologies from people who would rather defend a lie than admit they lost someone real. You don't reread conversations, trying to find the moment where it all went wrong, because now you understand. The moment it went wrong was when you let your guard down for someone who had no intention of protecting what they found. And it hurts. Not because you miss them, but because you know they never really saw you. They saw what you could give, not what you were. And that's the kind of pain that doesn't cry anymore. It just hardens. Silently. Permanently. You're not the same. And thank God for that. Thank God you learned to stop breaking yourself into smaller pieces just to make others feel whole. Thank God you learned to sit with your silence instead of chasing noise that never brought peace. You used to be terrified of being alone. Now you crave it. You used to over-explain your heart. Now you let actions speak. You used to ask, why would they do this to me? Now you say, I'm glad they did, because I see clearly now. That clarity, it's your power. It's your revenge. And it's the reason they'll never have access to you again. Because access is earned now, not through words, not through guilt, through consistency, through presence, through proof. You don't trust apologies, you trust behavior. You don't believe promises, you believe patterns. And if the pattern's broken, the connection is too. No anger, no shouting, just that same silence, the kind they laughed at, the kind they thought meant weakness, the kind that now defines you. So let them wonder, let them pretend, let them perform regret behind closed doors while they post smiles in public. It changes nothing, because you're no longer seeking justice. You became it quietly, ruthlessly, unapologetically. That knife, it didn't kill you, it crowned you.